division. Sort of.
No, you said the spheres.
Of Toho?
The spheres of toe, that's the spiritual root of Sinas Chinam. Number 3, if the person did absolutely nothing to warrant hate, why would his friend have Sinas Chinam? Yeshus. Is it possible to have Sinas Chinam and have a reason for the hate and still be called Sinas Chinam?
Not like legitimate reasons.
What?
It's really just excuses and justifications.
Right. Doesn't mean every time it's an excuse, but it could be that the reason came later. First came the hate, then came the reason. Yeah.
Could you explain to me a little bit more?
Which one? The spiritual root of Sinas Chinam. Well, Sinas Chinam means division between two people. So everything down here evolves from something up there. So up there in the spheres, in the world of Tohu, not in the world of Atzilus, there was a breaking of the vessel because the spheres weren't able to coexist together. So from the fact that there was division up there, this is where it evolves from, that there's division down here. How would you define Yeshus, or one who is a Yesh?
Self-centered or self-conscious?
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have a few words. We'll see which one, like the thesaurus, to see which one fits best in the context. Self-centered. I think what's more accurate is even an excessive. Not ego. Ego is also Yeshus, of course, but excessive consciousness of self, awareness of self, focus on self. When it's excessive, what is excessive? There are probably infinite levels in what excessive is, but it means more than just the normal functioning of a human being. Every human being is aware of themselves, but when the awareness of self is excessive, that's the Yeshus. And how would you define bittul? So bittul doesn't mean a person doesn't know that he exists, because obviously that doesn't happen. But again, it means a person who's focused on Hashem, focused on what he's doing, what he's accomplishing, not on self. I mean, I think of a simple example would be when you are walking down the street. Are you aware that you're walking down the street?
Yeah.
When you're going on stage to perform in front of 10,000 people, are you aware that you're performing? Is it the same awareness? Of course not. When you're on stage, you're very aware of yourself and every movement and what you look like and what you sound like and how it's all about me. That's what I'm doing now. I'm performing, so I'm very aware of myself. When you walk down the street, I know that I'm there, but that's not what my focus is. My focus is I'm going into a store, I'm going onto the bus, I'm crossing the street, I'm looking around at the trees, whatever I'm doing, but it's not thinking about self. Number 7, what does it mean that Yeshus needs more space in which to spread out? The more space it has, the more his presence is reinforced. And together with that comes number 8, which is the opposite. What does it mean that bittul doesn't need more space? In fact, spreading out in more space does absolutely nothing to reinforce his presence. How do we explain it in a simple way?
Because you're just so lovely.
Okay.
Like you don't leave space for anyone else or for anyone else. And it's mostly space. Like maybe.
So what does this spreading out mean?
Like they involve themselves in everything, so you can get like offended.
It starts self-control and then come bigger and bigger.
That's true, but that's another point. Yeah. I remember the point we made in class was that something which is emes doesn't need to spread out. I mean, it doesn't have to be recognized and acknowledged and endorsed by anybody else. It's just emes because it's emes. Remember, I gave you the example that if you would erase from every single arithmetic book in the world that nowhere in the world could you find where it's written 2 + 2 = 4, then that concept doesn't get any weaker, any smaller, any less. And if you would take 2 + 2 = 4 and you would write it up in 10, 100 million, billion places, it doesn't get any bigger. Because emes is emes. Something which is not true, the more people that accept it, the more people that recognize it, the bigger it becomes. If nobody recognizes it, it has no substance altogether. So basically, Yeshus is someone that needs to spread themselves out. They need other people to make room for them. They need other people to acknowledge them. They need other people to admire them, to compliment them. All these needs, it's part of the spreading out. And the person himself in his head, he's thinking about himself, how important it is and how where his status, it's all making a lot of noise, because other than that, there's really no real true substance. Bittul, all this is unnecessary. And because something which is emes, so what's the part which is not emes? Yeshus means the awareness of self-independent of Hashem. That sense of independence of Hashem is not emes. And therefore, the more it spreads out, the stronger it is. That's what Yeshus is. As we go along, we'll learn more about the nature of Yeshus, the consequence of Yeshus. Let's turn to page 69. Why is it that a Yesh feels threatened by another person's presence?
It's like the idea that if you're there, I'm not there.
Right. If someone else occupies space, then by definition, there's less space for me to occupy and to spread out. Again, where do you see this in a more pronounced way is by people who have similar talents or businesses, that when someone else has a business, which is exactly what I have, or has a talent, which is exactly what I have, I feel threatened by that. That's going to take away a little bit from my space, from my importance, because someone else has exactly the same thing. And if there's 10 people that have the same thing, I become even smaller. Imagine I have a certain talent that everyone says, wow, that's amazing. Then you find out, oh, they also have this talent. I just became a little smaller. Then I find out 10 people have the talent. Oh, then I became even smaller, because that's what makes the difference, whether I'm bigger or smaller. So person feels threatened by the other person. And the same thing, number 10 is the opposite. Number 11, okay, all this is all connected. 11, 9, 10, 11, 12 is really all one thing, just put in different words. The reason why I did this is because if you want, you can make copies of this, or I can give you copies of this and write it out. But when you write things out, it becomes much more clear. So how does all the above explain why a yesh has sinas chinam? At the end of the day, there's a lot of details about Yeshus, but at the end of the day, the main point, and that's the main point of this chapter, is that the cause for sinas chinam is Yeshus. And Yeshus means that I feel threatened by the other person. And in fact, the more quality other person has, the more I feel threatened. So even though we say it's baseless, meaning the person is not really doing anything to me, he's not bothering me, he's not harassing me, he's not threatening to take away my parnasa, to take away anything from me and have any fights with me, but nevertheless, I feel threatened, just the mere existence. Okay, so let's move on to chapter 9. Let's open the Sefer. Chapter 9 is on page 69. And this chapter is going to explain, remember we said yesterday when the question was asked, but how could you know if it's really Yeshus? How do you know that it's sinas chinam? And so we said that one of the ways of knowing this is where you see the result. What does it lead to? So here he's going to mention two things that are sort of results of the Yeshus or sinas chinam, which means if I see these two things in me, I could very well suspect that that's because I have a severe condition of Yeshus. You need to take medication for that. The medication is learning this mind, by the way. Yeah, prescription. This is also the reason. This explains why there's hate between one person and another without any reason. Actually, just can't tolerate one another. This is the part that he's introducing here. He looks at the other person with a bad eye, in a negative way. He despises the other person. Even the good that the other person possesses, he looks down at it and sort of dismisses it. He will negate and denigrate the person's divine service. So the person does do good things. He's davening, he's learning, he does certain mitzvahs, maybe even exceptional certain mitzvahs. He'll put it down. He'll make it into nothing, and all of his kiyum and Torah mitzvah shalei. So the fact that he puts it down, he'll also give a reason. His davening is worthless because of this and this reason. I saw the way he davens; it's nothing. I saw the way he learns; it's nothing. I know he gives a lot of tzedakah, but it's nothing. He does it for this reason, that reason. Always find a reason to put down the other person's good character traits. Even though the person never caused them any harm, he's not even thinking, not even planning to actually do something to him. So in other words, when we say sin is chinam, it doesn't mean that I want to go hurt the other person. I don't want to hurt him, I just can't stand him. And there's no reason, can't really find the right a justified reason for that. Page 70. And that's what it means when it says in the pasuk, Achechem Seinechem. So in this booklet, one of the things we do this with all the Maimarim, is that you can see all these sources inside where the pasuk is. So this is a pasuk in Tanakh. In fact, we just read it this past Shabbos. It was in the Haftorah that we're reading, page 42. This is the Haftorah that we're reading this past Shabbos. It's read every time there's a Rosh Chodesh on Shabbos. Read this Haftorah. So here you have the words Achechem Seinechem. Seinechem means your brothers who hate you, meaning not hate that's coming from the other nations, but it's coming from your own brothers. But he is explaining the meaning of the word. The word ach in Hebrew means chibur, connection. Two things that are joined together. In other words, we find this in reference to other places in Torah where it's not even talking about relatives, talking about objects. And it'll use the term like ma'achim, means you can connect two pieces of material. So ach means lashon chibur. Hainu gam kishein dover ha'mafed b'neim klal. Even though there's nothing that's really separating these two people, so they're called achim. They're bound, they're bonded, and they're connected. And nevertheless, they hate. One hates the other. Like he said before, because he can't tolerate it. So that's number one. Number one is that. And again, if we really are honest with ourselves, we'll notice that we do that. That someone will point out, did you see what this person did? It's such a nice thing. And your reaction, either in speech or in thought, will be big deal. They did it for this ulterior motive. Like what's pushing you to first of all, it says in Pirkei Avos, you should always judge people favorably. So why am I thinking that for that reason? Which means it's coming from a place where I don't want to recognize any good in that person. And even if someone points it out, I'll find reason to put it down. That's one sort of manifestation of Yeshus. There's another manifestation of Yeshus. He's also not going to be happy when he hears that the other person is prospering is having certain good things happening to him. Just the opposite. God forbid, if this person would actually be happy in his heart. There's a possibility that someone else is suffering, someone lost money, someone had other kind of negative thing happen to them, and this person actually feels good, as if he really deserves it. And even if he doesn't, even if it's not that bad, that he doesn't sort of enjoy hearing that this person is suffering, he won't necessarily be upset about it, it won't bother him. But it's really wrong. The MS, page 71. Every person should actually feel pain and anguish when he hears that someone else is suffering. In fact, even more than more than a person is feeling pain from their own suffering, they should feel even more from another person's suffering. Why? When a person suffers, they could look at themselves and try to find the reason why it's actually happening. Why did Hashem make this happen? And they could sometimes come to the conclusion because of things that he did which were inappropriate. Like our sages say, if a person sees that they're suffering, we should look into, examine his deeds, and see maybe there's something that I'm doing, and because of that, these things are happening. If he'll search the he'll find. The Gemara says, and if he can't find anything, he can attribute it to the neglect of Torah study. We know that this applies only to men. Men have a chiyuv, an obligation, that every free moment that they have has to be used for Torah study, unless it's something which is absolutely necessary. Of course, we're human beings, we have all our personal needs. Yeah, man has to go to work, has to spend time with family, wife, children. But we're talking about when there's free time, a man is obligated to use that time for Torah study. And you might remember this from the beginning of Tanya, that this is considered the hardest mitzvah to observe, because it's constant, every free moment. Like in Tanya, he brings down the greatness of Rabbah, that he observed this mitzvah to such a degree that the angel, which is the opposite of life, could not get to him because there wasn't even 1 second that he could have learned and wasn't learning. So, therefore, when it comes to myself, I say Hashem made this happen. Probably he wants me to correct something. And like we know, the Rebbe would tell people, check your mezuzah, tefillin, kashrus, family purity, maybe there's something wrong in these areas. And by the way, I just want to add, it doesn't always mean that it's a punishment. And in fact, there was an incident that happened in Eretz Yisrael many years ago. This was shortly after the Rebbe, the Rebbe came out with Mivtzoyim in stages. We know there's Mivtzah Tefillin, Mivtzah Mezuzah, all these Mivtzoyim came out in stages. The first one was Mivtzah Tefillin. That was during the 1967 crisis and during the war and after the war. And then months later, the Rebbe came out with Mivtzah Mezuzah to make sure that everyone has a mezuzah and the mezuzahs are checked. During that time period, there was a very big tragedy in Israel with a terrorist, Yasser Arafat, who got so much attention as a statesman and whatever. He and his men killed 17 children. They went on a trip and they ambushed them and they killed 17 children, Rahman al-Islam. After that incident, someone who must have been connected to the school, and the Rebbe spoke about mezuzah, said, let's check the mezuzahs. And they found 17 mezuzahs that were not kosher. So the person publicized it to encourage people to check your mezuzahs. So naturally, those in Israel who are anti-religious or anti-Lubavitch, I'm not sure which one it was, wrote an article accusing Chabad that you're taking advantage of a tragedy like this to promote your campaigns and so on and so forth. And how dare you say that just because there was no mezuzah, these children deserve to get killed and so on. It was, of course, a very nasty article. But the Rebbe addressed it by Farbrengen. And he said, Chas v'sholom, to think that because there was no mezuzah, that's why it happened. The Rebbe gave an analogy of someone who was in a war zone, and they're all told to wear, helmets. Someone takes off his helmet. And unfortunately, a bullet comes that way, and he gets hit. So it's not a punishment because you took off your helmet. That's why this happened. No, it happened because it's a war zone, and there's reasons why it's happening because people are shooting bullets. Had you worn the helmet, it would have protected you. The same as over here. The Rebbe said things are happening for other reasons, which is beyond our understanding. We don't understand, and we have no right to chas v'sholom, especially with another person, to say that it's a punishment. We don't know Hashem's reasons why things happen. But even if there's a reason for something to happen, if there's a mezuzah, the mezuzah would protect. And the fact that the mezuzah is missing, it means the protection was lacking. So therefore, when the Rebbe tells somebody, correct something in family purity, correct something with the mezuzah in this room, or correct something with the tefillin or with kashrus, it's not saying it's a punishment for that. It's saying this would serve as a protection against whatever it is that's going on. So when it comes to self, I see that something happened, something's missing, and this is Hashem telling me to correct that. Yeah.
What year was that?
It must have been in the early 1970s, I think. I should mention the learning is the Ilishmas, an uncle of mine, Zalman Ben Reb Chaim Rav Hertz. He was actually killed one day before the Day of Independence. I don't know if you saw this, but they're now celebrating in Israel 80 years from a place called Gush Etzion. A lot of history to that place, but they were they had played a big part in the Yidden winning the war in 1948. So where they lived, this place now it's called then it was called Kfar Etzion, a little village. Now it's called Gush Etzion. It's a whole area, Baruch Hashem, thousands of people living there. But the men sent the women and the children to Yerushalayim, and they stayed behind to fight. And they succeeded, but the last day, right before the war was over, a whole group of those people were killed on this day, on the 4th. So anyway, this is just a side point. We'll talk about tomorrow when we'll have a talk about the whole idea, because people question, why don't we celebrate Yom HaTzmaut? Why don't we celebrate the Independence Day? Don't we believe that this is a big miracle and so on? Of course we do. Then there's a question why we don't commemorate Yom HaSha'ah, which is the day of that we commemorate the Holocaust. So we know that tomorrow we'll have set aside a time. We're going to talk about it with everybody together in the school. Getting back here, so Adrabi Kablim Ba'ava, the person will accept, like it says, a person should accept suffering from Hashem and see it as a tikkun l'nefesh, that is something you need to do, which would be a tikkun. By doing this, it'll rectify something spiritually. That's for myself. But when it comes to another person, we're not allowed to make such sort of a cheshbon that the person, what happened to them because they didn't deserve it or they deserved the punishment. On the contrary, it's you shouldn't judge the other person for himself. The other person is, you're not supposed to look at another person and say, oh, they deserve something. On the contrary, that person is better than me. And like it says, you're supposed to judge every person favorably. So if that's the case, not only I should be feeling pain from another person's suffering, I should feel it more than my own, because for my own, I look back and say, where did I go wrong? On the other person, I'm not allowed to think that way. On the contrary, and you should ask Hashem for mercy for the other person. So the fact that somebody chas v'shalom could feel good about the other person's suffering, or the fact that I don't feel bad about the other person suffering, is also a result of this sinas chinam, because of the division. And especially if we explain that it's a result of yeshus, so the more the other person is put down, the better I feel about myself. Like, why is there such a nature in people? Pirkei Avos tells us, always judge people favorably. Why is there a nature in people that they like to see faults in other people? When something happens, the first thought that's going to come is they did something wrong. Then someone will say, no, maybe it was for this reason, maybe it's for that reason. Why is that the first thought? Why wouldn't the first thought be, probably they wanted to do something good? What'd you say, Rivka? Yesh is because when a person's a yesh, by putting the other person down, again, that leaves more space for me. To give the mashal that there's two people, and there's one person that's much taller than the other person. You don't feel good about it. So there's two ways you can overcome that problem. One person, you climb up in a chair, now you're higher than them. But that takes effort. You have to get a chair, you have to climb on top of the chair and become higher than them. The other way is easier. You knock him down on the floor. So he's on the floor and you're standing, so you're higher than the other person. So a yesh always looks to knock down the other person because that enhances their sense of yeshes. Yes.
So why does someone have yeshus in the first place? Is it like from low self-esteem or like survival?
No, self-esteem, generally speaking, is a positive thing. Yeshus is not survival. Yeshus is a gift that Hashem gave us all. He created us with yeshus. In other words, Hashem wanted human beings. The definition of a human being is a person who feels what we feel, that we have our own separate, independent identity. So we can't get out of that, no matter what. That's always going to be there. That's why I keep saying that the definition of yeshus is not a sense of self. Everyone has a sense of self. It's part of being human. It's an excessive focus on self. So the yeshus is there because that's the definition of a human being versus an angel, let's say. An angel is totally bottled to Hashem. He's one with Hashem, doesn't feel any sense of separateness. We do, and that's the way Hashem wants it, because he wants us to be human beings. But the Iyar of Yeshus is, to what degree is that sense of self sort of in my mind, how pronounced it is and how big it is. Yes, Shana.
Could like a form of yeshus be like you're like insulting or like putting down other people just to run away from yourself, like to not have to deal with your own stuff? Would that be like? Yeah, it's from the same family. Yeah, cousins, first cousins. It's all the same idea. It makes me feel better about myself. Yeah.
You're mentioning that like when something happens to someone else, you can't think like, oh, maybe it's because they did this or like maybe punishment for that. But can you do that about yourself? Like if something bad happens, you be like, oh, maybe it's because I did whatever.
So you could. The only thing is like this, that like everything else, we have to. One of the tactics of the Yetzer Hara, which is one of his best pieces of ammunition, is to bring a person to be down. Just like they talk about war now, there's this missile, that missile, and that. Oh, this is the strongest missile. The strongest missile the Yetzer Hara has, one of the strongest, is depression and sadness. Why? Because it looks like it's kosher, and really it's not. It's just there to knock me out and to bring me down and to drain my energy. And once that happens, it leads to, unfortunately, many other things. So therefore, if a person is going to say, oh, this is happening to me because I did this and this. So it depends how it affects me. If it affects me in a way that I become motivated to improve, good. If it affects me in a way that I become sad and depressed, oh, it's my own fault, I did it to myself, and you're just focusing on that part of it, then it's from the Yetzer Hara. They have to stop and take a different route. So the other route is, like I said before, it's not Chas v'Shalom, because I did this, I caused this to happen. It's just that there's things to do that would be a protection. We don't have to. That's the way the Rebbe trains us to think now. It's more about what do I need to do in order to bring Hashem's bracha. In fact, if there is something the other person is failing and I need to, and I know that, he says, if he knows about it, then he should speak to him, push it privately, not embarrassing the person, but he should speak to him one-on-one. He should point out what it is that he's doing wrong. She will do tshuva, and then he'll have Hashem's bracha. But generally speaking, this reaction that I feel good about what's happening to that person, or chas v'shalom, I don't feel bad. This is a result of sinas chinam. So in this short paragraph, he basically said two things, which is a result of sinas chinam. One was the first thing that he said in the beginning of the paragraph, and that is that he's always looking to put down even the good in the other person. And the second thing is that he doesn't feel pain from another person's suffering. In Lubavitch, there was a chassidus called Reb Hendel, and I said he was exceptional in Avos Yisrael, and he was a person that, exactly like it says in the Maimar, that when someone else was besimcha, he was bursting with joy. If God forbid something happened, which was the opposite, he was broken to pieces. So they tell the story that there was a chassid who was arrested. His name was Reb Chaim Morozov. You know the Morozov family in Crown Heights. This is their grandfather. Depends who you know. It was either their grandfather or great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather. So he was arrested. And then a few days later, or maybe more, the news came that he's released from jail. He got so excited, he ran into the room of the Rebbe Rashab, and he said, the Rebbe, Chanya is out of jail. He started dancing in the Rebbe's room. And the Rebbe stood up and started dancing with him. How does he do that? Is that respectful? He was so overwhelmed with joy that he didn't know what he was doing. Probably later he said, what did I just do? But that means, that shows you how much he was besimcha from another person's joy. And on the contrary, it says that at the end of his life, he was sick. One of the things that led to that sickness was someone's house burnt down and he lost all his possession, and he took it very to heart and had an effect physically on his heart. So he was sort of soaked. He was soaking in Avos Yisrael. So that's the way it's supposed to be. Of course, that's an exceptional level, but another person's pain should bother me, and another person's simcha should make me happy. Sinas chida maybe she'eni mishtata b'simchas chaveru b'tzaroi. That's one thing. And the second, and the sur atzma yochalim setam, for my own suffering, I can find a reason. When it's my friends, I have to look at the person in a positive way, and I see that the suffering, all I need to do is daven to Hashem and beg Hashem to have rachmanas on that person. Now he's going to talk about another thing, which is also a manifestation of sinas chinam. You'll notice as we go along that when he's talking here about sinas chinam, he's not talking about just ordinary people, even people who daven. And when I say daven, by the way, it's an expression the way we speak in Hasidic circles. But davening, when we say daven, meaning daven is the way a chassid davens, like spends time in davening. It's a time of self-refinement. It reminds me of a friend of mine. This is a true story. A friend of mine that when he was younger, he learned in a non-Hasidic yeshiva. And then he decided, he was involved with someone who was teaching Chassidus. He loved it. He decided going to Israel to learn in Kfar Chabad. And by the Farbrengen, the Mashpia, this is his first week there, Mashpia is having the Farbrengen, and talks to one of the Bachrim and says, why don't you daven? Your father used to daven. I know, remember your father, your grandfather used to daven. And he's thinking to himself, whoa, what kind of yeshiva did I come to? You have to talk to Bachram about davening. But it meant davening ba'arichas. Now, the Chassidim used to spend a lot of time on davening, meditate on something in Chassidus before davening, and then the davening itself used to be with a niggin and think about the deeper meaning to the words and how it applies to himself. So from what he's going to say here, you'll see that he's talking about sinas chinam by people who are more refined people who learn nigla, learn chassidus, they're davening, and they still can have this condition of sinas chinam. That's what he's going to talk about. Hine, b'yoser yimtza oven sinas chinam b'beres ram ba'ovda Hashem. You find it even more by people who ovda Hashem. So Yesterday we mentioned this also, that he said that dafka in shuls and yeshivas, shchita, rabbanim, where there's a place of kedusha, you find this more than other places. So we said the other day, like, what's the reason for that? Why would it be? He said there were two reasons, but one reason was that dafka, because it's a place of kedusha, the Yetzer Hara makes more effort. So there's an example of this in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says if a person is davening, and in the middle of davening, he gets all sorts of thoughts that distract him. He becomes very upset with himself. And he's thinking to himself that my davening is worthless. Because look, I'm davening, and in the middle of davening, I'm thinking about something else. So the Alter Rebbe says, no, it doesn't mean that your davening is worthless. Why? Because you're davening, and the thoughts are not coming from you, the thoughts are coming from Yetzer Hara, is throwing these thoughts in. In fact, the Alter Rebbe said, Adrabah, this is a sign that your davening is actually good. And it gives the example that when two people are wrestling, if a person sees that the other person is gaining upper hand, then he's going to make more of an effort to bring him down. In other words, because you're davening, the Yetzer Hara feels so threatened, so therefore he attacks you even more dafka during davening. During the day, he doesn't have to attack you so much. You're not in such a good place in the first place. But when I'm davening, he sees me davening and getting all warmed up, that's when he attacks. It says one of the reasons for talis is sort of, it's like a protection against the arrows that the Yetzer Hara is throwing in. So the same here, dafka by people who are Ovdei Hashem. You see those terms, Ovdei Hashem means an Oved, someone who works on himself, self-refinement. He could end up having sinas chinam. What we see is that each person builds himself his own sort of pedestal, his own little platform, and he can't get together with other people. He's doing his own thing. And why can't you get with other people? This one's no good because of this. That one's no good because of that. The other one's no good because of a third reason. He just can't find someone who he could match up with. Everybody is no good for one reason or another. So this idea that he looks down at other people, as we said before, and he sees the fault in other people, and that fault is what prevents him from becoming close to them, is very damaging. And he's going to explain, it's very damaging in terms of learning, it's very damaging in terms of personal avodah, refinement, because all these things are so much stronger and better when you're together with others. The learning is very different if you're learning with others. Your personal avodah is very different if you can work together with others. And the fact that you can't, it looks as if because you don't have the faults that these people have, but really is because of sinas chinam. So we'll do this tomorrow. Mitzvah Hashem. We'll start here from Yud, from page 74. You're welcome. Okay, these booklets can go into the drawer here, but the books, the Spartan, could stay on the table, I think.
You don't want them on the shelf.
What?
You don't want them on the shelf.
On this, back on that room?
Yeah. No?
I think it's a big bother every morning. If you don't mind, then fine.
Where did they put them?